There's always been something fascinating about the unknown, the mystical, and the uncharted. And that's why I was at the cemetery that night, under the moon's silver light. My name is Emily, and I'm a believer and spiritual practitioner within the New Age movement. I'd heard of a practice called grave sucking, where you could absorb the energy of the dead by laying atop the resting places of the newly deceased. The cemetery was alive with whispers of the past, a symphony of memories and stories long forgotten. The air grew colder as I walked among the gravestones, and a shiver ran down my spine. The surroundings were eerie, but it was exactly what I'd come for. I could practically feel the life force crackling around me. I finally found the grave that called out to me. It was freshly dug, and I couldn't resist the urge to connect with the energy of the deceased. I lay down, my fingers gently tracing the engraved name on the stone. A chill settled over me as I closed my eyes, preparing to embark on this journey. The night was alive with sounds, rustling leaves, and distant whispers that made my heart race. Each little scare sent shivers through me, but I was determined to continue. The moon watched over me, a silent witness to my exploration of the supernatural. A strange sound echoed through the air as I began to feel a connection. My eyes shot open, my heart pounding. I could hear the muffled voices of two men and the unmistakable clinking of shovels and crowbars. Panic surged through me. I tried to scream, but before the sound could escape my lips, darkness enveloped me. I awoke to a throbbing pain in my head, my vision blurred. I was lying on the cold ground, my hands tied behind my back. Before me, two men worked feverishly, their shovels striking the earth with a rhythmic intensity. They dug with a purpose, revealing a casket below. My heart sank, and dread clung to me like a shroud. They exhumed the corpse, revealing a sight that would haunt my nightmares. The deceased's eyes were closed, their body adorned with funeral garments. The men rummaged through the casket, retrieving items of value. It was a grotesque violation of the sanctity of the dead. My mind raced as they did their work, my helplessness like a weight upon my chest. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the violation that laid itself out before me, the feeling of powerlessness consuming me. Once the men had taken what they wanted, they began to rebury the casket, the sound of the earth settling in its place, filling the night. They worked with a chilling efficiency, as though this was routine. As they finished, one of the men turned to me, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice laced with a threat. As the man moved in my direction, I scrambled to my feet, desperate to escape. Adrenaline surged through me, and I yanked at my bindings and, to my surprise, they came loose. The man drew closer, and I could smell the stench of alcohol on his breath. "I won't tell anyone, I promise," I pleaded. The man chuckled, a menacing sound that made my skin crawl. "It's not a matter of trust," he said. "You know too much." I tried to back away, but my legs were weak and I stumbled. The man lunged, his hands reaching for my throat. I screamed, but the sound was cut off as his fingers closed around my windpipe. For a moment, everything went dark. I thought it was the end, and that I was about to join the eternal slumber of the dead. But then, a burst of energy surged through me, and I fought back with a strength I never knew I had. I thrashed and kicked, clawing at the man's eyes, anything to break free from his grasp. With one final push, I managed to free myself, gasping for air as I scrambled away from him. The man lay on the ground, clutching his face in agony. The man's partner started to come towards me, hesitated, stumbled, and turned to run away. I wasted no time. I took the opportunity to run, my heart pounding in my chest as I made my way through the cemetery. I ran until I could no longer, my body shaking with fear and adrenaline. It wasn't until I collapsed onto a bench, tears streaming down my face, that I began to realize the extent of the trauma I had experienced. I knew that I could never forget the night I saw the true face of evil lurking in the shadows of the dead. After that traumatic night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man's face, his eyes cold and unfeeling, and his breath reeking of alcohol. My nerves were shot, and I was constantly on edge, jumping at every sound and shadow. My therapist suggested that I take a break from my spiritual practices, but I couldn't. The magic was the only thing keeping me grounded, making me feel alive. I knew I had to face my fears and conquer them. So, one night, I found myself back at the cemetery, my heart pounding with fear and excitement. I was determined to take back what those men had stolen from me, my connection to the supernatural world. I lit candles and incense, creating a circle of protection around me. As I lay on the ground, my fingers tracing the engraved name on the tombstone, I felt the fear begin to slip away.
It was a typical Friday night in our small town, and we were in the mood for adventure. The thrill of the unknown was our drug of choice, and we craved it more each day. So a few friends and I decided to meet up and explore the local cemetery. The cemetery, of course, was never crowded at night. The dead were our silent companions. We brought a few bottles of our favorite spirits, eager to create a night we'd remember for years. Under the moon's ghostly glow, we gathered in the eerie stillness, our laughter mingling with the hushed spirits of the deceased. As we made our way deeper into the graveyard, we toasted to our youthful audacity, each swig of alcohol warming us against the night's chill. Like ancient sentinels, the tombstones watched over us, casting long, ominous shadows in the dim light. Our footsteps echoed in the silence, a symphony of recklessness that danced with the spectral wind. But it wasn't long before the revelry faded, and a haunting unease replaced it. That's when we saw it, a grotesque sight that made our hearts stop in terror. A body, lifeless and pale, lay crumpled on the ground like a discarded marionette, its strings severed. Panic surged through us, sending a jolt of icy dread racing up our spines. We couldn't tear our eyes away from it. As we approached the lifeless figure, our steps were hesitant, as if we were traversing the threshold of some otherworldly nightmare. The air grew colder with each passing second, and our breaths hung in the frigid night like spectral wraiths. The moon, casting an ethereal glow, bathed the scene in a ghastly light that intensified the horror of our discovery. The scene before us was chilling in its starkness. It was as if the world had been frozen in a moment of dread, the very essence of life and time suspended. The dead man's eyes stared lifelessly at the moon, their vacant gaze an eternal testament to the horrors he had witnessed in his final moments. His pallid and waxen skin bore the telltale signs of a life extinguished prematurely. His disheveled clothing spoke of a struggle, a desperate fight for survival that had ultimately proved futile. The earth around him was disturbed as if the ground had recoiled from the grim fate that had befallen him. The silence that enveloped us was thick with tension, the weight of the situation pressing down on our chests. It was a chilling reminder that our carefree adventure had taken a nightmarish turn, plunging us into a realm of terror we could never have anticipated. We stood there, frozen in fear, trying to understand what was before us. The dead man's eyes seemed to follow us as we moved closer, unnerving us even more. We debated whether to call the police or run away and pretend we never saw anything. Fearful and disoriented, we eventually called the police, who arrived quickly with their flashlights casting an eerie glow over the graveyard. The officers began to question us, their faces etched with suspicion. As the night wore on, we were subjected to relentless interrogations. We explained that we had stumbled upon the body and that we had been partying in the cemetery, but the officers were skeptical. The grim atmosphere and the silent graves made it seem we were the culprits in this horrid scene. Hours stretched into the night, and the darkness weighed heavily on us. We were held as suspects, the cemetery shadows closing in around us. The dead seemed to bear witness to our ordeal, their eerie silence echoing our own growing unease. Finally, the truth came to light. The man had been a wanderer, a drifter, who met a tragic end in the graveyard we had chosen for our reckless escapade. His death was ruled an accident, but the memory of his lifeless body haunted us. Once a place of adventure, the cemetery had become a site of dread. The laughter and cheer that had once filled the night were silenced by the echoes of the dead. We left that place, and our thrill-seeking days forever changed. The memory of that night clung to us like a shroud, a haunting reminder that certain places belonged to the living, while others were the solemn realm of the departed. It was a lesson learned through fear and dread, a reminder that one should not tread so lightly beyond the boundaries that separated these two worlds. And the graveyard where we had once danced, drank, and sang with the dead was forever tainted by the memory of the lifeless body we had discovered. It was a lesson in the fragility of life, in the inescapable grip of darkness.
My heart raced as I stood amidst the towering tombstones, the cool night air sending shivers down my spine. I was part of a young group of adults who had hatched a daring plan to rob the undertaker, who we suspected of stealing valuables from the graves in his cemetery after dark. The atmosphere was electric, with a mix of fear and excitement. Dressed in a ghostly white gown, I was the chosen distraction. My task? To play the part of a spectral figure lurking in the darkness. As the others crept towards the undertaker's on-site housing, I was to draw his attention. We were playing a high-stakes game, and the lure of stolen treasures fueled our audacious plan. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its glow over the cemetery as I began my slow and eerie approach. My white dress billowed in the night's silent breeze, and my footsteps were as light as the wisps of fog that curled around the gravestones. I watched from a distance as the undertaker appeared, his lantern casting flickering shadows on the graves. He was known for his nocturnal activities, digging fresh graves under the cover of darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached. The undertaker, seemingly oblivious to my presence. My steps were purposeful, calculated, and designed to sow doubt in his mind. I hoped that, to him, I would be nothing more than a specter, a ghostly apparition conjured by the darkness. Perhaps the ghost of a woman he had robbed shortly after being put to rest. As I drew nearer, the undertaker's movements grew more erratic, his hands trembling as he shoveled dirt into the gaping maw of the grave. I could see the sweat on his furrowed brow, his breath quickening as he attempted to complete his task. In the stillness of the night, my white-clad figure was a stark contrast to the undertaker's frenzied work. He glanced up, his eyes widening in terror as he caught sight of me. Panic and disbelief played across his face, his lantern flickering in his trembling grasp. I could feel the others closing in on his dwelling, the plan coming to fruition. But then, something unexpected happened. The undertaker, his eyes filled with fear and madness, abandoned his work and lunged towards me, shovel in hand. Terror coursed through my veins as I turned and fled, the sound of my white dress rustling like a ghostly whisper. The undertaker's footsteps echoed behind me, his breath hot on my neck. I pushed myself harder, every step fueled by fear and desperation. The cemetery, once a place of serene rest, had transformed into a nightmarish realm of pursuit and terror. The gravestones loomed like silent witnesses to our reckless quest for stolen treasures, and the moon hung overhead, casting its cold light on the chase. I could hear the shouts of the others in the distance, their voices filled with alarm as they realized the danger I was in. But the Undertaker was gaining on me, his shovel raised, ready to strike. As I ran through the labyrinthine pathways of the graveyard, I could feel the Undertaker's presence, an unrelenting force of darkness and dread. The world around me blurred into a terrifying nightmare, my heart a relentless drumbeat of terror. Just when I thought he would catch me, the others burst from the shadows, their sudden appearance causing the Undertaker to stumble and falter. With a collective effort, they managed to disarm and subdue him. It was a chaotic confrontation, a showdown between those who sought to reclaim ill-gotten riches and the one who had amassed them. The moonlight, previously a cold, unfeeling witness to our terrifying chase, now illuminated the dramatic scene. The Undertaker's eyes widened in disbelief as he was surrounded by a group determined to infiltrate his realm of darkness and deceit. The air crackled with tension as we engaged in a relentless struggle. Once a tool of the gravedigger's sinister trade, the shovel was wielded in self-defense, swinging wildly through the night air. But the odds were against the Undertaker, as he was outnumbered and outmatched. Our audacious heist had brought us face to face with the Undertaker, and the outcome of our daring confrontation hung in the balance. The stolen treasures were our driving force, a tantalizing promise that urged us onward. Finally, as our relentless determination overcame the Undertaker's frantic resistance, he was subdued. The ill-gotten riches would soon be in our hands, and the cemetery, which had served as a backdrop for our audacious theft, was now forever linked to our daring escapade. The Undertaker's fate was sealed, and the moon, a silent witness to our nighttime heist, hung low in the sky, casting its eerie light upon the scene. Our daring plan had taken us from the world of the living into the shadowy realm of the dead, and we had emerged as the victors, ready to claim our stolen prize. The night's pursuit had ended, and we had successfully achieved our goal of claiming the stolen treasures for ourselves. The once peaceful cemetery, where the departed lay at rest, had been transformed into the site of our audacious theft. Though we had triumphed over the Undertaker that fateful night, his chilling gaze lingered in my memory, the lifeless stare haunting my thoughts.